Hi, it's Jessica DaMassa, and I'm here with Scott Seidelmann. He is the Chief Commercial Officer for Omnicell. So, Scott, great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, so I understand Omnicell is launching a movement in healthcare about the autonomous pharmacy, and they want others to jump on board. So, sell us this movement. What does the future of pharmacy look like?
I think before you get to our movement, you've got to step back.
Okay.
And the thing that excites me the most about this is that pharmacy is by dollar amount, it's the largest portion of healthcare. But more importantly, it touches every patient in almost every care setting. It's one of the only areas of medicine that has a true ROI to it. It's a huge portion of the industry. But at the same time, and it's unfair to character assassinate pharmacy, it's almost every other portion of healthcare. There are tons of problems, whether you want to look at quality and errors and impact on hospital admission rates, economics. Patients don't take their medications, and there's downstream, but there's problems everywhere, right?
Right.
And so the idea that you have this enormous part of healthcare that, really can and should be massively impactful, but it has a ton of problems. So I think that the way we really approach this is that, this part of the industry can be transformed, that transforming the pharmacy care delivery model. But really in this case, the exciting thing for us is by enabling that pharmacist, that nurse, that caregiver to practice at the top of their license, which basically means, look, how can we remove all the administrative, all the back-end complexity from their lives and let them focus on doing the thing that they got into this in the first place for? So I think in terms of saying it's a movement, I think that we want to partner with them on this journey and transform this unbelievably portion of the healthcare industry.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the issues here within the industry as it stands today, for those who may not be so familiar. So we've got a crowd of innovators who are focused on all sorts of patient engagement disruption or trying to improve clinician workflow in the EMR, all of that stuff. So break it down for me. What are the issues that are probably first and foremost top of mind for somebody who's working as a pharmacist in a hospital pharmacy?
Yeah, I think, look, I've spent the last 18 months meeting with chief pharmacy officers, and to say that they're overwhelmed by a set of problems is maybe an understatement, right?
Okay.
Because, I think, look, put your hat on as chief pharmacy officer, you walk in the four walls of the hospital, and the CEO grabs you and runs down the hallway and says, look, where's our specialty program? That's, I just came back from a conference, that's the fastest growing revenue and profit driver for a health system, we've got to get into that. The CFO's coming and saying, yeah, that's great, but, drug spend is growing at 10x the top line, labor spend is almost one of the highest labor spends in the hospital. The chief compliance officer comes down this hall and says, look, what are we doing about our diversion programs? Are we 340B compliant? It just goes on and on and on, right? Nursing staff is irate because, 40% of a nurse's time is involved in drug distribution. They're just so overwhelmed, right? But I think the two that bubble to the top of the list, which really in the context of kind of Maslowian hierarchy, the food, water, shelter for a chief pharmacy officer is right now managing that inventory and managing their labor efficiency.
Okay.
Getting the handle on those two things, which is really, I think when you boil down where we're starting our journey is really focusing on those two items is really what starts to free them up to focus on the thing that they're actually really good at, which is the clinical aspects, making sure that the right drug is ordered for the right patient at the right time, the right complications, et cetera. And so bottom line, how can we help them manage their logistics, their inventory, and the drug spend more effectively? Tell
me what the role technology is playing in this, or maybe that it's not playing in this. So how far have some of these technologies that have the potential to really disrupt artificial intelligence, deep machine learning, or even robotics, some of the other things that have the potential to really transform the experience, how broadly integrated have they been so far in pharmacy?
Yeah, look, I don't think pharmacy is any different than the rest of healthcare right now, which is, I think AI, for a whole bunch of obvious reasons, holds a ton of promise and it will get there. It's so early days, right? And there's very little that's actually been done. And a big reason for that is not that the AI is not ready or that the AI and a lot of, for last couple of years, it's always been, well, we don't have annotated data sets that are big enough. Well, that problem's really been solved. The biggest problem is how do I get those insights into the workflow?
Right.
And that's not a problem just in pharmacy. That's a problem in radiology. That's a problem in the rest of healthcare, which is, great, you can show me over here all this great AI, but I'm doing my job here and I'm going really fast and there's lots of things coming at me. So look, I think that we are very excited about all of that and we're investing in that, et cetera, but there is so much low-hanging fruit. We talk about Omnicell today as the leading automation company in the industry, which basically means that we're the market leader in automation products. Very little of the workflow has actually been automated at this point, right?
Okay.
And so I think as we step back and look at how do you bring technologies to bear, it's less around, I think, what is the hardware and the component. It's much more around saying, well, what are the workflows involved with drug distribution in and around a hospital? And which of those workflows, if re-engineered, however you do that, with robotics or a drone or simply a smart tote that is monitored by software that directs a technologist to go from point A to point B, but those workflows, as you re-engineer those, what's the cost and the benefit to the system? And so we've got to work our way through that to say, look, where can we start, right? And maybe the answer is another $3 million robot. Maybe the answer is a drone, or maybe the answer is just simply creating a closed loop notification, say for, the idea that, hey, look, cabinet X is going to run low on a drug. You should dispatch a pharmacy tech up there with 50 more doses of X, Y, and Z, right? Today, that's manual. And so, you've got a CPO with a basic problem of ensuring that they have enough drugs in each one of these cabinets, but has to manually remember, did anyone go check them this week or today? It's all reactive, right? That's just a simple technology problem to solve. You don't need AI to solve that, right? I mean, you can basically predict, and I know how many doses you used this week, last month, this week, et cetera, and just make a prediction that, I know how many's in it right now and how many you're going to use. And so why not just send a text message to the pharmacy tech that's the closest saying, hey, go do this, bring 50 doses up to the cabinet, and when you're there, click accept, right? So look, bottom line is, I think the promise of AI, which is incredible, and we're investing in it, and a lot of other players are too. I think when you're actually, which is so true in innovating in healthcare, when you're actually in the weeds and on the front lines of healthcare innovation, so much of it is basic things that have to get better.
And you're not alone. I mean, I talk to startups all across the industry, and it's like we're still trying to disrupt faxing things, basically.
No, totally agree.
No, and so fine. So I'm curious from you, and thank you for that, because it's like I really want to get a state of play. What's going on in this space, and then where do you think we're at right now? I mean, so you guys, like you have said, you're talking about autonomous pharmacy. You're talking about the future. You guys have leveraged a lot of different technologies already, trying to digitize some of those processes that are already there. What's unique to me about talking to somebody like you is, you guys are working within the workflow, which is oftentimes maybe not the case with a startup that's trying to come from outside in. And you guys are really working with the pharmacy teams and with the health systems to do this in a way that manages risk and brings along the teams and all of that stuff. So tell us how things are going when you're working on innovation from the inside.
Yeah, I spent a decade in startups in the healthcare technology space. And for me joining Omnicell, there are no shortage of big problems to solve in healthcare, period.
Absolutely.
There's no places, I mean, walking around a hospital or talking with payers, it almost feels to me like the price is right. There's prices everywhere, there's broken processes, there's so many places that you can apply technology to change it. What is, for a whole bunch of really good reasons and a whole bunch of really bad reasons, innovating in healthcare is unbelievably difficult. And meaning bringing a proven innovation to scale, right? Is so difficult, right? Which is, frankly, it's way more complicated than transportation, hospitality, financial services, right? Which is why we haven't seen, an Uber, an Airbnb, even a Salesforce in healthcare yet, right? It's just unbelievably difficult. What's so exciting about Omnicell, and I think often just, to your point, it's just very few people know about it. Half the health systems in the United States are our customers. That means half the hospitals in the U.S., half the post-acute care environment, a third of the retail environment has our technology in it. 130 of the top 200 health systems are clients and have long-term strategic agreements with us.
Awesome.
Which means that, and it's shocking to me as kind of coming from the startup world, that our ability to walk into a health system with a sort of, let's say, a subscription offering for, let's just say, an analytics workflow that is not even MVP yet, right? But our ability to walk in and say, hey, look, we have an idea. You've done business with us for 15 years. Our technology's everywhere in the hospital. We have long-term strategic agreements. Would you like to work together on this? Would you like to pilot this?
Dream situation.
No, agreed. And so, honestly, as long as we have the right culture and the right DNA and protect those innovations in a way, it's a whole other topic for a different time, but I actually think we can bring innovation to scale a lot faster than I ever could as a startup entrepreneur.
How far away do you think we are from something like this autonomous pharmacy of the future that we're talking about, where drugs are making their way through the hospital system, they're not being touched? And I think the other, as a corollary to that, do you think that some of the things that are happening in the hospital system market, with some of these bigger systems buying some of the smaller ones, hospitals closing down, do you think that that's going to speed things up?
Absolutely, and we're seeing that, right? Because now, the good news is you just simply amass more scale, you've got more buying power. Pharmacy is no different than a lot of areas of technology. Technology for a lot of these health systems, the bane of healthcare is clinical variation, right? And so if I'm a health system and I've acquired 15 hospitals that do things in 15 different ways, not only is that bad medicine and bad patient care, it's expensive for me too, right? And so a lot of times, and I think it's well understood, health systems use technology to drive standardization, right? And so you're seeing a lot of health systems now, do complete upgrades of their pharmacy automation simply because they want to standardize across their health system. So that's good, and it's going it's going in favor. I would say that for a long time, say over the last 10 years, I think the big trend around health systems, frankly all of healthcare, was this vision of best of breed, right? Vendor A has a product that's best, I'm going to use that one. Vendor B has one, et cetera, et cetera. And before I know it, I end up with all these different systems that maybe on their one hand are best of breed, but they all have to integrate back into other things. And when those integrations drop, all of a sudden, I am managing plumbing that is unbelievably unstable and difficult to deal with, right? So I think you've seen health systems come full circle to say, look, I want best of breed, of course I do, but it's gotten too hard for me to manage this portfolio of products and vendors. And for both my internal contracting and management, as well as just simply IT, I want to partner with one vendor that has a comprehensive portfolio and is innovating and talking about going in the direction that I see as well. And so we've been really, really successful in that respect because we have, over the last 4 or 5 years, made a lot of investments in the other components. And now, really, we're the only provider that has a comprehensive portfolio and now starting to pull it all together as a platform and deliver much of it as services. And that's a really compelling offering for a health system.
Absolutely, and I think, you're on top of a trend there.
Yeah.
I think you are. I think we're seeing a lot of convergence across the industry. All right, last thoughts for you. How far away are we from an autonomous pharmacy? How many years?
I actually don't think we're that far. I think that the reality is, let's forget the technology, because I think when we say autonomous pharmacy, what people hear is a vision of drones and robots all over and no humans touching anything. I think if you just step back and think about it from its essence, it's really about the medication management process, which is, the goal of that. Well, how does that function today, right? You essentially have a process that is, medication management, very, very high spend, tons of impact, good and bad, on clinical outcomes, tons of problems and errors. Well, how is the industry trying to solve that problem? A little bit of technology that doesn't talk to each other and throwing lots and lots of bodies at it. And so how should it work? It should work that from the time the drugs show up at a hospital, institutional pharmacy, a post-acute care environment, to the time that the drug is distributed to that patient, very little human touch. And when the human touch is involved, it's monitored, directed, and feedback, right? Okay. So I actually think that if we define this as starting with visibility and then actually starting to apply workflows to these processes to impact them, I think that's something that's very, very achievable, where we can actually see, from the time the drug shows up and the time it's needed, and I press that button, and I can monitor where that drug is, whether or not it's in a drone or it's in the pocket of a human. It's monitored, and it can be redirected. If there is traffic on floor 7, move it around, take it to a different one. And when it's dropped off, I know it. I don't think we're that far from that. Okay. And if this can be done, this isn't a terribly difficult problem to solve, right? It's been done elsewhere.
Okay, we'll take not very long at all, and we'll just stick it there. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I'm Jessica DaMassa with WTF Health. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.